What's up, everybody? Dr. Ray here, and today we're talking about ADDIE, the instructional design ADDIE thing that we talk about all the time. I've talked about whether it's a framework process before, but what happens is we get this term ADDIE model that we see. Now I'm on the Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, Reddit. I just read things. Talking to different people all the time. And the term ADDIE model, even in like job descriptions, ADDIE model. Do you know ADDIE? Do you know ADDIE? Do you know ADDIE? It has become this great, like simplified way to say, do you understand the instructional design process? And while that's great that we have been able to communicate like that, it's very problematic because what that has done is it's put it in people's mind that there's this thing called the ADDIE model, and it's this model that was created in like the 70s that people are still pushing today for you to use. And that thought process couldn't be any further from the truth whatsoever. Couldn't be any further from the truth. And it's problematic because it's pushed certain, well, before I even get to that part, let's just say that it's very, very, very problematic for a number of reasons. And I want to kind of talk about why it's problematic. And I want to talk about what ADDIE really is. So right now, what ADDIE is a framework for instructional design. It's like a great framework for the management of an instructional design project. That is what it is. That is what ADDIE is to instructional designers. When someone comes up to me and says, hey Ray, or hey Dr. Pastor, hey Dr. P, whatever they want to call me that day, I respond to like 50 different names, and that's fine. I respond to all of them. I don't care what anybody calls me. As long as I know they can say, hey you person, and that's fine. As long as I know they're talking to me. I'm using the ADDIE model for my project. And I say to them, well, which version are you using? And let me tell you why I say that. I say that because there is no such thing as the ADDIE model. I don't even know what you mean when you say that. Like, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? Because there's a bunch of ways to do analysis, design, development, implementation, evaluation. Like there's a bunch of different ways and a bunch of different models within those that you can use. Like there are a bunch of different analysis models and analysis models and design strategies and development strategies and evaluation models that you could use, or change model, like all kinds of stuff. So what version are you actually using? What does that mean? Well, I'm using traditional ADDIE. What? Okay. So I have to ask them again, what does that mean? Which model are you using? Now, if we go back to the history of when ADDIE was created, and as you know, if you've watched my interview with the founder of ADDIE, Dr. Branson, it wasn't even called ADDIE back then, but they created this model at Florida State, and like the next few years changed it. Next few years changed it again. Next few years changed it again. Like there was the original thing they created in the 70s, they changed like in the 70s again and again in the 70s and multiple times, and then multiple times in the 80s. And in fact, if you trace the history of that original ADDIE model from the 70s, it is now the model that the Army uses. And it is so much different than what was written about in the 70s. And why it's problematic is because when someone says traditional ADDIE model, I'm either thinking they mean the current Army model or they mean the model from the 1970s. And I know they can't be talking about the model from the 1970s because, first of all, it wasn't even called ADDIE. And we don't really know why. We have some theories, but don't even know exactly why it was changed to ADDIE. And also, who would be using a model from the 70s? The people who made the model in the 70s changed it again in the 70s because they realized that they came up with like a great framework, but that the actual model, like the steps, how you performed each one of those steps, was going to be that it didn't really work from what they originally came up with. So they kept modifying it as they used it. So Why that's problematic is when someone says, I'm using ADDIE, I'm thinking, are they talking about they're using the actual Army model that's out there right now? The one that was, the basically the current version of what was originally, or are they talking about the one from the 70s? I don't actually think they're using either of those, and I'm not sure they know. Because a lot of times when I ask people which model or version are you using, they look at me like I'm crazy. Like they don't necessarily know which model they're using. They're like, well, I was taught one in school. Well, which were you taught? Um, so for example, there are many different versions. We've got Keller and Kemp, Dick and Carey. We've got people using SAM, people using this and that, Assure, whatever it happens to be. There's many different, and I will say there's 1,000 different ID models out there. Every single one of those models is based on ADDIE, the ADDIE framework. They're all based on it. They are all a version of ADDIE. So when we say the ADDIE model, I don't really know which one you mean. So which one are you talking about? Because I can do analysis a bunch of different ways. I can do design a bunch of different ways. Development a bunch. Whose are you really using to guide this project and why? And is it linear? Is it not linear? Is it iterative? Like, because there's all kinds of different ways to do all of that. And the correct way is the one that works best for the project you're on. Not that my company uses this one all the time for every single thing. Well, it's probably not the most efficient way to do it, because the most efficient way is to do it for every project, because some will differ in scope, some will differ in, resources, quality, time, that kind of thing. So you pick the model that's most appropriate for your project. But maybe this is just like a little rant of mine. But it's very frustrating. Not that I don't mind people throwing around the term ADDIE model. It's just that it's become problematic. And you should try not to do it as much. To try to catch yourself sometimes, because what we're doing is we're actually doing a disservice in the field by using the term ADDIE model. Because it's putting this picture in everyone's head that there's this thing called the ADDIE model that we're all using, that it's what's taught in schools, it's what's written about in books, when that really isn't true. What's taught in schools is they're teaching people the ADDIE framework, and they're usually teaching like Dick and Carey. And the reason they're teaching it that very linear method, and they're teaching it traditionally like that, is because at first, the first time you do it, it's so much easier to learn it like that. And a lot of times, like in schools, we're not just teaching one model. Like when I teach analysis, I teach a lot of different components of analysis, a lot of different components of design. So it's, when they say ADDIE model, I think that like some of my students will refer to like all the courses. And it's like, no, that's not a model. You're just almost like forming one in your head of what you think it is. And I think that's what people are doing. So I just, wanted to create a quick little video to kind of talk through that issue. And the more appropriate term is the ADDIE framework, and which model are you using that's based on ADDIE? Because all of the instructional design models, assuming we're talking about, the ones that cover all the processes, are versions of ADDIE. All right. Let me know what you all think. Later, everybody.